Taken before the alien queen. What she asked shocked me. Captain Ethan Reyes had always been a man of discipline. The military had shaped him into a leader, a warrior, someone who was always in control. He never imagined that a routine mission in deep space would be the one to change everything. The stars outside the cockpit of the ship were as bright as ever. Ethan sat in his seat, looking out at the vast emptiness. His crew was calm, following their orders without a second thought. It was supposed to be a simple mission, patrol a section of the galaxy that was known for pirate activity. No one had expected anything unusual. But then, without warning, everything changed. The alarms blared and the ship shook violently as a bright light engulfed the cockpit. Ethan grabbed the controls, trying to steady the ship. He had seen enough space battles to know something was wrong. "Captain, we're being pulled off course," one of the crew shouted. "Steady, everyone. Brace for impact," Ethan barked, but his words were lost in the chaos. The light grew brighter and the ship was suddenly pulled into a gravitational force far stronger than any known in the sector. Everything went black. When Ethan woke, he felt disoriented. His body ached and his head throbbed. Slowly, he opened his eyes, trying to make sense of his surroundings. He was in a large, cold metal room, its walls glowing faintly with blue light. The air felt different, thicker, almost unnatural. It was as if he had been transported to another world. "Where am I?" he muttered to himself, his voice hoarse. He tried to sit up, but his hands were bound to the chair he was sitting in. The door to the room hissed open, and a tall figure stepped inside. Ethan tensed, his training kicking in. The figure was humanoid, but its skin was a deep shade of violet, and its eyes glowed faintly with an otherworldly light. The being's long, flowing robes shimmered in the low light as it moved toward him. "You're awake," the figure said, its voice deep and smooth, almost melodic. "Good." Ethan narrowed his eyes, studying the alien. "Where am I? Who are you?" The alien didn't answer right away. Instead, it circled him, examining him as if he were some sort of specimen. Ethan's mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening. He was no scientist, but he knew that this alien race was unlike anything he had encountered before. "I am a servant of the Zardal Empire," the being finally said. "You are aboard the flagship of Queen Thalira." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The Zardal Empire. The name echoed in his mind, a name he had heard in hushed whispers but never faced. The Zardal were a powerful, ancient race, known for their brutal conquests across the galaxy. No one had ever dared to oppose them for long. "What do you want with me?" Ethan demanded, trying to break free from his restraints. "Calm yourself, human," the alien said. "You are not here to be harmed, at least not yet." Ethan shot the alien a sharp look. "Not yet." "You have been chosen," the alien continued. "Chosen to stand before the Queen. She has an interest in you, Captain Ethan Reyes." The words struck Ethan like a blow. Chosen, stand before the Queen. He had no idea what this alien was talking about, but he had a sinking feeling that this was not going to end well. He had fought in countless battles, but this was something entirely different. "What does she want with me?" Ethan asked, his voice steady despite the unease that bubbled inside him. The alien didn't answer immediately. Instead, it pressed a button on a small device attached to its belt. A holographic image flickered to life in the air before them. A tall, regal figure seated on a massive throne. The Queen. Ethan could feel her presence even through the projection, a sense of power and authority that radiated from her like an invisible force. Queen Thalira was stunning. Her violet skin shimmered, her features sharp and regal. Her eyes, glowing with an inner light, seemed to pierce through Ethan as if she could see into his very soul. There was something unsettling about her calm demeanor, something that made Ethan feel small in her presence, even though she was miles away. "This is Queen Thalira," the alien said, its voice respectful. "She is the ruler of the Zardal Empire. She has summoned you to her court." Ethan's mind raced. The Zardal Queen had summoned him. Why? He couldn't think of a single reason why an empire of this magnitude would be interested in someone like him, a human soldier far from his home. He had never been anything more than a cog in the machine of war, a tool to be used and discarded. "I'm not here to serve you or your queen," Ethan said, his voice low but firm. "I'm a soldier. I fight for my people, not for alien empires." The alien didn't seem fazed by his defiance. "You will stand before the Queen soon enough. She has her reasons for bringing you here." Ethan's jaw tightened. There was no way he was going to play along. He had to figure out a way to escape, to get back to his crew, to warn Earth about the Zardal and whatever they were planning. You don't have a choice, the alien added, as if reading his thoughts. The Queen's will is absolute. But if it makes you feel better, you will not be harmed in the meantime. Ethan shot a glance at the door, considering his options. He was still chained to the chair, but he had to do something. He couldn't just sit here and wait for whatever fate the Zartel had in store for him. He wasn't sure what kind of game they were playing, but he had no intention of being their pawn. "Where is my crew?" he asked, trying to shift the conversation to something that might help him. The alien paused, then smiled faintly. "Your crew is safe for now. They are being held in separate quarters. They will not be harmed unless you provoke the Queen." Ethan clenched his fists. Safe for now. The words echoed in his mind, a bitter reminder that his crew's fate was tied to whatever plans the Queen had for him. If she wanted him alive, they were likely safe. But if she changed her mind, "I will not cooperate with you," Ethan said, his voice firm. "I want to speak to the Queen myself. No intermediaries." The alien seemed to consider his words for a moment before nodding. "Very well, the Queen will see you shortly. But remember, Captain, this is not a negotiation. You are here because she wants you here." As the alien turned and exited the room, Ethan was left alone with his thoughts. The room felt colder now, the silence deafening. He had no idea what the Queen wanted with him, but he was determined to find out. And he would do whatever it took to protect his crew and himself. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. Ethan stared at the door, waiting for the inevitable. He knew that his life had just taken a turn he could never have predicted. The Zartel Queen had summoned him for a reason, and it was up to him to uncover it. Whatever the Queen wanted, he wasn't going down without a fight. Captain Ethan Reyes felt the cold metal chair beneath him, the restraints still tight around his wrists. He had been in situations before where escape seemed impossible, but this felt different. The room around him was silent now, save for the occasional hum of machinery he couldn't see. The alien that had brought him here was gone, and all Ethan could do was wait. His mind raced as he thought back to the moment he had first woken up in this strange, unfamiliar place. The alien ship, the violet-skinned being, and the mention of Queen Thalira. It was all overwhelming, and the more he thought about it, the more questions began to form. Why was he here? What did the Zartel want with him? Why not just destroy him or imprison him like so many others? There had to be something more. The door to the room slid open again, and this time, two guards entered. Their presence was imposing, their black armor gleaming under the soft blue light of the room. Both aliens were tall and intimidating, their faces hidden behind dark visors. They didn't speak, but the silence felt heavy, as if they were waiting for something. Ethan didn't trust them, but he also knew that he didn't have a choice. The time for defiance could come later. One of the guards stepped forward and motioned for Ethan to stand. There was no argument, no choice but to comply. His muscles protested as he stood, the effects of the sudden disorientation from earlier still lingering in his body. The guard quickly moved to unlock the restraints on his wrists, and as the metal cuffs fell to the ground with a sharp clang, Ethan rubbed his sore wrists. "Move," the guard commanded, his voice as cold as the ship's walls. Ethan said nothing. He wasn't going to show weakness, not now, not in front of these beings. They led him through narrow corridors, each one colder than the last, with walls that seemed to pulse with an eerie light. The ship, he realized, wasn't just some transport vessel. It was massive, far larger than any human ship he had ever seen. He couldn't help but feel small in it, but he kept his head high, his resolve firm. Finally, they reached a large chamber, its walls adorned with strange symbols and glowing patterns. The atmosphere inside was thick with power, almost as if the room itself was alive. At the far end of the room sat a throne, and upon it sat Queen Thalira. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he looked at her. She was everything the rumors had described, tall, regal, her violet skin glowing softly in the dim light. But it wasn't just her appearance that commanded attention. It was the sheer presence she carried, a calm yet overwhelming aura that seemed to fill the entire room. Her eyes, those glowing orbs, locked onto Ethan's, and for a moment it felt as if she could see straight through him. She spoke, her voice smooth and melodic, echoing through the chamber. "Captain Reyes, it is an honor to have you here." Ethan's heart skipped a beat, but he kept his voice steady. "What do you want from me?" Queen Thalira smiled, though it was not a smile of kindness. It was the smile of someone who knew something you didn't, someone who had all the cards in hand. "You misunderstand, Captain." I do not wish to take anything from you. In fact, I am offering you something. Ethan's brows furrowed. He had been through enough battles, enough diplomatic talks to know when someone was playing games. But the way she spoke, so calmly and confidently, made it clear that this wasn't some simple negotiation. Offering me something? Ethan repeated, his voice hard. You abducted me, brought me here against my will. Now you're offering me something. What is it you want from me? Thalira's eyes never left him as she slowly stood up from her throne. I want your mind, Captain, your knowledge, your experience. Ethan frowned, unsure of what she meant. My knowledge of what? Of leadership, she said, her tone unwavering. Of combat, of strategy. Ethan blinked. You've got to be kidding me. You brought me here to teach your people how to fight. Not just to fight, Thalira said, her voice low and filled with purpose. To lead, your kind, humans, are unlike any species I have ever encountered. The fire in your people's hearts, the way you fight with everything you have, no matter the odds, I need that. My empire needs that. Ethan shook his head, struggling to wrap his mind around what she was saying. You want me to teach your people how to fight, after all this? After you abducted me and dragged me across the galaxy? His voice grew louder. You think I'm just some tool to be used? Thalira stepped down from the platform, her presence commanding the room even more than before. I do not take you for a tool, Captain. I take you for a leader, a warrior. Ethan's chest tightened as he thought about his crew, his men, and the life he had left behind on Earth. I'm no leader, he said quietly. I'm a soldier. I do what I'm told. I follow orders. Thalira's expression softened, but only slightly. Then you have yet to understand the true meaning of leadership, Captain. Leadership is not about orders or rank. It is about inspiring others to follow you, even when all seems lost. It is about fighting for something greater than yourself. Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had always followed orders, always done what was asked of him. But Thalira's words seemed to stir something deep within him, something he had buried long ago. The idea of leading, of inspiring others, it was a concept he had never considered. Could he really do that? Could he lead these beings, these aliens who were so different from him? Before he could respond, Thalira continued, her gaze piercing. I've seen the way your people fight. I've studied your history. You have faced enemies far more dangerous than anything my empire has ever known. And yet you continue to fight, to survive. That is the strength I need. Ethan stood in silence, weighing her words. He had always been a soldier, never a leader. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that maybe this wasn't just about him. Maybe this was about something bigger, something that could change the course of this war, of this galaxy. Thalira took a step closer, her voice softening. I am asking for your help, Captain. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. Help me save my empire. Help me lead. Ethan looked into her eyes, and for the first time since his capture, he wasn't sure what to think. Was this a trap, or was it an opportunity? I'll help you, he said, his voice firm, but on one condition. Thalira raised an eyebrow, intrigued. And what is that condition? I want my crew back. I want them safe. Thalira studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. Agreed, your crew will be returned to you once you have helped me. Ethan stood tall, feeling a strange sense of resolve building inside him. The path ahead was unclear and the stakes were high, but one thing was certain. This was no longer just about surviving. It was about leading. It was about fighting for something greater. He was no longer just a soldier. He was about to become something more. Captain Ethan Reyes had never felt so out of place. Standing before Queen Thalira, he had been asked to do something he never imagined. To teach the warriors of the Zardal Empire how to fight, how to lead, how to inspire. This was not a mission he had signed up for. This was not the kind of battle he was used to. But as he looked into Thalira's eyes, he realized something. There was no turning back now. The deal had been made. His crew would be released if he agreed to help her. But it wasn't just about the crew. It was about the future of the Empire and maybe even his own future. Thalira had promised his crew would be safe, and he was going to hold her to that promise. As the door to the chamber closed behind him, Ethan took a deep breath. The next few days would be crucial. He had no idea how he was going to teach these alien warriors, but he had no choice. He had to try. He wasn't sure where to start, but he had to find a way to break through their pride, their arrogance, and show them the human spirit that Thalira had recognized in him. The guards escorted him down a long corridor, the walls lined with strange symbols and dim, pulsating lights. Ethan kept his eyes forward, his mind racing. He had been in many difficult situations before, but this This was different. These were not just enemies. These were people, an entire empire depending on him to help them fight for their survival. After what felt like an eternity, they arrived at a large training hall. The space was vast, the floor made of smooth, dark stone. At the far end stood a platform, and below it, a group of Zartal warriors. They were tall, intimidating, with their armor gleaming in the dim light. Their expressions were unreadable, but Ethan could sense the challenge in the air. These warriors were not used to taking orders from anyone, least of all a human. One of the warriors, a massive figure with dark purple skin and sharp features, stepped forward. His armor was decorated with intricate designs, signifying his rank. His eyes glowed faintly, and there was no mistaking the hostility in his gaze. This was the leader, the one who would decide if Ethan's teachings would be accepted or rejected. Ethan straightened his back, meeting the warrior's gaze. He had seen this kind of defiance before, but he knew he couldn't back down. "I'm here to help," he said, his voice steady. "I'm here to teach you how to fight better, how to survive." The warrior snorted, the sound echoing in the hall. "We do not need your help, human," he growled. "We are Zartal, we are the greatest warriors in the galaxy." Ethan felt a fire spark within him. "Then prove it," he challenged. "Show me what you've got." The warrior hesitated for a moment, clearly unsure of how to respond. Then, with a swift movement, he unsheathed a massive blade, its edge shimmering in the light. He swung it through the air in a perfect arc, the blade cutting through the atmosphere with a hum. Ethan didn't move. He stood there, watching the warrior carefully. The way he moved, the way he swung the blade, it was precise, but it lacked something. It lacked strategy, coordination, and most of all, it lacked heart. When the warrior stopped, panting slightly from the effort, Ethan stepped forward. "You're strong, I'll give you that," he said. "But strength alone won't win battles. It's strategy, it's timing, and most importantly, it's working as a team." The warrior scowled, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He hadn't expected a human to stand up to him like this. Ethan could see the cracks forming, the smallest signs of curiosity. "Let me show you something," Ethan said, gesturing to the rest of the warriors. "All of you form up. I'll show you how humans fight, how we work together." The Zartal warriors exchanged glances, some sneering, others unsure, but they followed his instructions nonetheless. Ethan had no weapons, nothing but his mind and his knowledge of combat. He knew that if he was going to win them over, he would have to prove that human strategy could match, if not exceed, the raw power of the Zartal. "All right," he began. "You're all strong, but strength is only useful if you know how to use it. The first thing you need to understand is this: you are not fighting alone. You are fighting as part of a team. Every move you make affects the person next to you. Every decision you make can mean the difference between life and death." Ethan walked up to one of the warriors, a smaller, younger-looking fighter who seemed hesitant. "You," he said, "you're the front line, you're the first to engage, but you're also the first to be taken out if you're not careful. Your job isn't just to fight, it's to protect your team." The warrior looked at him, confusion in his eyes. Ethan smiled, trying to put him at ease. "Let me show you," he said, taking a defensive stance. "Try to strike me." The warrior hesitated, then lunged forward, his blade cutting through the air. But Ethan was ready. He sidestepped with ease, using the warrior's own momentum to guide him off balance. The warrior stumbled, and Ethan took the opportunity to tap him on the shoulder, signaling that he had been taken out. "You see," Ethan said, stepping back, "you relied too much on your strength and not enough on your awareness. You need to think ahead, anticipate your opponent's moves, and protect the rest of your team." The warrior looked at him, stunned, as if he couldn't believe a human had just bested him so easily. Ethan turned to the others. "Your strength is nothing without strategy. You are powerful, but you are scattered. You fight for yourself, not for each other. That's what makes you weak." The silence in the room was deafening. Ethan could feel the weight of their eyes on him, and for a moment he wondered if he had gone too far. But then the warrior he had bested slowly nodded, a sign of respect, albeit reluctant. "Again," he said, stepping forward. "Show us more." Ethan's heart pounded, but he couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could make a difference here. He could teach them what it meant to fight as a team, to lead. For the rest of the day, Ethan worked tirelessly with the Zartal warriors. He showed them human tactics, combat formations, and the importance of working together. There were moments of resistance, moments when they were too proud to listen, but Ethan pushed through. He didn't give up, and slowly the warriors began to understand. By the end of the day, they were not perfect, but they were better. They were a team working together for the first time, and Ethan could see the change in their eyes. They were no longer the arrogant, overconfident warriors they had been when he first arrived. They were beginning to understand what he had meant. They were beginning to understand leadership. As the training session ended, Ethan looked around at the warriors, their expressions mixed with respect and uncertainty. They still had a long way to go, but they were finally listening. And that, Ethan thought, was a victory in itself. Thalira watched from the doorway, her expression unreadable. Ethan met her gaze, and for the first time since he had arrived, he saw a flicker of approval in her eyes. "You've done well, Captain," she said, her voice soft but filled with authority. "You have shown them what they need to see." Ethan didn't smile, but he nodded. There was still much to be done. But for now, he had taken the first step toward earning their trust. And maybe, just maybe, he had started to believe in himself as a leader, too. The days passed quickly as Ethan continued his training with the Zardal warriors. Each day he pushed them harder, demanding more from them than they thought they could give. And each day they responded. It wasn't easy, not by any means. The warriors still resisted at times, still fought the idea of a human teaching them. But Ethan had earned their respect little by little. There were moments when they doubted him, when they sneered at his methods, but as the weeks went by, they began to see the results. The warriors were learning, adapting. Their movements were sharper, their strategy more coordinated. They were becoming a team, something they had never been before. But the true test was still to come. Ethan stood in the training hall one morning, watching as the warriors ran through their drills. Their movements were more fluid now, more synchronized. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. A small smile tugged at the corner of Ethan's mouth. They weren't just fighting better. They were starting to believe in themselves, and that was the first step. As he watched, a shadow fell across the floor. Ethan turned, his heart skipping a beat when he saw Queen Thalira standing in the doorway. She was dressed in the same regal attire as always, her violet skin glowing under the dim lights of the training hall. She looked at him with those piercing eyes, and for a moment Ethan couldn't read her expression. "Captain Reyes," she said, her voice soft but firm, "you have done well." Ethan stood up straighter, trying to hide his surprise. "Thank you, my queen," he said, his voice steady. Thalira nodded, her gaze shifting to the warriors who were now finishing their training. "They are better, but they are still not ready. The true test of their strength has not come." Ethan's stomach tightened. He had known this day would come, but it didn't make it any easier. "What do you mean?" The queen stepped forward, her eyes scanning the warriors as they gathered their weapons. "The Zardal face an enemy more powerful than anything we've ever encountered. We have trained, yes, but now we must see if it is enough. There is no more time for preparation. The war is upon us." Ethan's heart sank. He had known that the training was leading to something like this, but hearing the queen speak of it made it all too real. He had been preparing these warriors for battle, but now the true test would come. Would they be able to stand together and fight, or would they fall apart when faced with the pressure of real combat? Thalira's gaze met his again, and for the first time Ethan saw something in her eyes that he hadn't noticed before: fear. It was brief, barely noticeable, but it was there. She was worried. Ethan had been so focused on the warriors, on the training, that he hadn't stopped to think about what it meant for the queen. This empire, her people, were depending on him now, too. "What is the plan?" Ethan asked, his voice firm. Thalira took a deep breath. "We will attack the enemy head-on. Our forces will engage them directly. But the warriors must be ready. They must fight together or we will lose. I need you to lead them, Captain. I need you to help them understand that this is more than just training. This is real." Ethan nodded slowly. "I understand." Thalira looked at him for a long moment, then turned to leave. "The battle will be soon. Be ready." As she left, Ethan felt a wave of responsibility wash over him. He had come here thinking he was just a soldier, a tool to be used. But now he was something more. He wasn't just here to teach the warriors how to fight. He was here to lead them into battle. He was here to help them win. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He lay on the bed in his quarters, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. The battle was coming. The warriors were ready, but were they truly ready? He had trained them, but he had never fought alongside them. He had never seen them in a real battle. Would they stand strong, or would they fall apart under pressure? He couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. There was still something about the warriors, something he couldn't put his finger on. They had become better fighters, but had they become a true team? Had they learned what it meant to trust each other, to work together as one? Ethan didn't know, but he was going to find out. The next morning, the warships were ready. The warriors stood in formation, their faces grim but determined. They were ready for battle, but Ethan could see the uncertainty in their eyes. They were nervous, and who could blame them? This was their first real test. Ethan stood at the front of the formation, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. He felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This was it. There would be no more training, no more preparation. It was time to fight. Thalira walked to his side, her presence as commanding as ever. She looked at him, then at the warriors. "Are they ready?" she asked. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "They're ready, but they need to know that this isn't just about fighting. It's about trust, trust in each other, trust in themselves." Thalira's eyes softened for a brief moment. "Then show them, Captain." With a final nod, Ethan turned to face the warriors. "Listen up," he shouted, his voice ringing out across the field. "This battle isn't just about us. It's about everything we stand for. It's about our future. If we fight alone, we will fall. But if we fight together, if we trust each other, we will win. Now get ready. The enemy is coming, and we will fight as one." The warriors responded with a roar of agreement, their weapons raised high. Ethan could see the change in them now. The doubt, the hesitation was gone. They were no longer just individual fighters. They were a team. As they boarded the warships and prepared for battle, Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This was what he had come here for. This was why he had trained them. To fight, to lead, to trust. The battle ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they were no longer just a group of warriors. They were a force to be reckoned with. And with that, Ethan led them into the unknown, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The battle was upon them. The warships lined up in formation, cut through the vast emptiness of space. Ethan stood at the helm of the lead ship, his eyes scanning the stars ahead. His mind was sharp, every thought focused on the task ahead. He had trained these warriors for this moment, but the true test would come when they faced the enemy. No amount of training could prepare them for what they were about to encounter. Beside him, Queen Thalira stood tall, her violet skin glowing softly in the dim light of the command deck. Her presence was powerful, but Ethan could see the tension in her posture, the way her eyes flicked nervously toward the viewport. She was the ruler of the Zartal Empire, but she was not invincible. She too was feeling the weight of the battle ahead. Ethan turned to her, his voice calm but firm. "Are the warriors ready?" he asked, his eyes locking with hers. "They are as ready as they will ever be," Thalira replied, her voice steady despite the uncertainty that lingered in the air. "They trust you now, Captain. You have earned their respect." Ethan nodded, but he wasn't sure if he could believe her words. Trust was one thing, but real combat was something else entirely. He had seen warriors fall in the heat of battle. He had seen men and women fight with all their strength, only to be overwhelmed by the sheer force of their enemies. But this was different. This was not just about fighting. This was about survival. The enemy fleet appeared on the horizon, massive ships with dark, jagged outlines, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. They were a terrifying sight, their hulls covered in layers of armor, their designs unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. These were no mere raiders or pirates. This was an empire just as powerful, if not more so, than the Zartal. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. This was no ordinary battle. This was the fight for the future of the Zartal Empire. "Ready the weapons," he ordered, his voice cutting through the tension in the air. "Prepare to engage." The crew around him moved quickly, their hands flying over control panels as they readied the ship for battle. The warriors on board, standing at their posts, were calm and focused. Ethan could see the fire in their eyes. They were no longer the hesitant, unsure soldiers they had been when he first arrived. They were a team now, a force to be reckoned with. The first shots rang out, explosions lighting up the dark expanse of space. The enemy fired with precision, their ships moving with deadly efficiency. Ethan's hand gripped the controls tightly as he directed the ship to dodge the incoming fire. The ship rocked, the sound of blasts echoing through the hull, but Ethan held his ground. "Return fire," he shouted, his voice steady. The weapons of the warship hummed to life, powerful beams of energy cutting through the darkness, striking the enemy ships with deadly force. Around him, the warriors took their positions, firing from the ship's turrets and fighting with a newfound intensity. They were no longer fighting for the Queen, no longer fighting for themselves. They were fighting for something more. They were fighting for each other, for their empire, for their future. The battle raged on, the sound of explosions and the hum of energy weapons filling the air. Ethan's heart raced, his mind sharp and focused. He had led them this far, now he had to lead them to victory. The enemy fleet was massive, but the Zardal warriors fought with a fierce determination that Ethan had never seen before. They moved as one, their tactics sharp and precise. They were no longer the disorganized, proud warriors they had been before. They were a team. They were working together, using their strengths to cover each other's weaknesses. Ethan's ship maneuvered through the chaos of battle, dodging incoming fire and returning shots with deadly accuracy. His crew worked in perfect harmony, each member knowing their role, each warrior moving with purpose. But the enemy fleet was relentless, their ships closing in, their firepower overwhelming. Ethan's eyes flicked to the viewport. He could see the enemy flagship, its massive guns charging up for a final, devastating blast. It was aimed directly at Thalira's ship, the heart of the Zardal fleet. If they didn't act quickly, the Queen would be destroyed. "All ships focus fire on the enemy flagship," Ethan commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Take it down before it's too late." The warriors responded with a roar, their weapons firing in unison as the ships closed in on the enemy flagship. Ethan's hands flew over the controls, directing the fire of their weapons with precision. The enemy flagship returned fire, but it wasn't enough to stop the fury of the Zardal assault. The first blast from their weapons struck the flagship's shields, sending ripples of energy through the air. The second blast hit its engines, sending the massive ship into a spin. The third and final blast struck the enemy flagship's core, and with a massive explosion, it erupted into flames. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as the enemy flagship disintegrated, its wreckage floating in space like a broken, shattered shell. The battle was far from over, but this was a decisive victory. The enemy fleet was reeling, their morale shattered. "Hold the line!" Ethan shouted, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "We've won the first round, but we're not done yet." The Zardal warriors rallied, their energy renewed. They fought harder, faster, pushing the enemy back with relentless force. The enemy ships began to retreat, their lines breaking as the Zardal pressed forward. Ethan watched as the last of the enemy fleet fled, their ships disappearing into the darkness of space. The battlefield was still, the only sound the hum of the warships and the quiet breathing of the warriors around him. The battle was over. Ethan exhaled slowly, the tension in his body finally starting to ease. He had done it. The warriors had done it. Together they had won. Thalira's voice broke through the silence. "Captain," she said, her tone filled with awe, "you have done what I could not." Ethan turned to look at her, his heart swelling with pride. "We did it together," he said. "The warriors, the crew, and you. This was a team effort." Thalira nodded, her eyes softening as she looked at the warriors around them. "They have proven themselves, and so have you." Ethan smiled, but it was a tired smile. The battle had been hard and the cost had been high. But they had won. The Zardal Empire had been saved, and the warriors had proven that they were more than just powerful fighters. They were a team, united in purpose and strength. But the war was far from over. There would be more battles to fight, more enemies to face. Ethan knew that the path ahead would not be easy, but for the first time since he had arrived in this strange empire, he felt a sense of hope. He had come to the Zardal Empire as a prisoner, a tool to be used. But now he was something more. He was a leader, a warrior, and a part of something greater than himself. And as he looked out at the stars, knowing the war was far from over, Ethan knew that he was ready for whatever came next.